This is the Discovery Files podcast from the U.S. National Science Foundation. I'm Nate Potker. When anatomist Richard Owen proposed the term Dinosauria in 1842, the known examples were just a handful of incomplete skeletons unearthed in the early 1800s. Today, there are over 1,000 known species. New specimens, the time to study them, and great advances in technology have allowed us a better understanding of the creatures that roamed the Earth millions of years ago. But new finds and fresh analysis can change the way we view these ancient creatures. Our guest today is Greg Erickson, a professor of anatomy and vertebrate paleobiology at Florida State University and curator at Florida State University's Biological Science Museum, who has played a role in many important discoveries over the years. Professor Erickson, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What sparked your interest in biology?
Well, I don't know. It probably comes from my father. My father was a very famous bear biologist. And so I grew up catching bears with him, to be honest with you. So I always had appreciation for nature. Later in his career, he worked on seals and killer whales. So I actually was involved with killer whale part of that. So I've always been into animals. But like most kids, I was also into dinosaurs too. And so, yeah, just kind of all blended together, I guess.
Right. And as you expand in one area, you get more interested and you follow the kind of paths that get you where you're going. Moving into the dinosaur work a little bit, I would like to first define what tyrannosaurs are as a genus, I guess, or the broader species besides just the T-Rex we know about. What kind of unites them?
Yeah, well, Tyrannosaurids is these are very large carnivorous dinosaurs. They'd reduced their fingers down to two main fingers. They had very robust teeth as adults. Some aspects of their front teeth that we call premolars that have a D shape to them. Some other minor aspects of the skulls and whatnot, but they were clearly the dominant predators in the latest Cretaceous.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is kind of the changes in how we look at them over the years. Like I was looking at some of the very earliest stuff from the mid 1800s to like dinosaur toys when we were kids that is more upright than it is now, and kind of like the posture has changed. Like, what about that for you has really cemented how the views of them shift over time?
Yeah. When these animals were first found, they were believed to be cold-blooded reptiles, and all reptiles today that drag their tails. So that's kind of the way they were depicted. Slow-moving tail draggers, so to speak. All my dinosaurs when I was a kid were like that, and only lately have we gotten to the point where they're what we call the teeter-totter pose, where the tail's up in the air. We know that from ossifying structures in their tails, that their tails were up in the air. But also, when we find trackways of them, you very rarely ever see a tail drag or anything like that. So they've definitely changed. So they went from being tall, or with the T-Rex, it went from being like 18 feet tall down to about 12 feet tall. It's so that's part of it. And I mean, every discovery we make about these animals changes our perceptions of them. We even think that Tyrannosaurus Rex may have actually had some feathering of some sort.
Mm-hmm. And that would be kind of something that didn't hold up over time, right? Like you're not finding remnants of that in the mud with what's fossilized. Yeah,
well, the preservation of feathers requires a very specific kind of sedimentology, very fine sediments, and so, like, for instance, in China, in Liaoning, we have birds and dinosaurs that have basically washed out into shallow lagoons that had really fine sediment and picked that up. But you look at an animal like Tyrannosaurus Rex being buried in river sediments. That's a very aggressive river, and so the sediment's much more coarse. So it's less likely that they're going to show up. Although we do occasionally find feather traces of some other dinosaurs, and I think down the road we may find that some of these Tyrannosaurids, including T-Rex, had some feathering. We know from skin impressions of T-Rex, it was mostly a scaly animal. The scales are very small. It kind of looked like a very beady looking, kind of like a Gila monster, I guess would be a good way to liken it. But if we look at the ancestry of Tyrannosaurids and the ones before, the earlier ones were feathered. The early ancestors of T-Rex were feathered. and these animals had feathering, kind of like a kiwi had. It kind of looked like hairs, and certainly for display, and even on the arms as a kind of looking like wings. Obviously, they weren't flying, but they were for display as well. So I think down the road we probably will find that some of these Tyrannosaurids and perhaps even T-Rex actually had some sort of feathery integument.
Now, you mentioned that they kind of adapted to having two claws. Can we talk a little bit about the little arms? Like, what were they actually using those arms for?
I think they were absolutely useless. I think, if we look at early ancestors of the Tyrannosaurids, they had normally proportioned arms, 3 main fingers, these sorts of things. Then when you get to these great big Tyrannosaurids, get 30 to 43 foot long animals, the arms kind of stay behind. They never got any bigger. In fact, we start seeing them losing one of their fingers. It's certainly vestigial. I believe that they're basically just vestigial elements, that just anatomical structures that weren't being used for their initial purpose. That doesn't mean they didn't try to use them for something. We see that with a lot of animals today. I mean, lots of lizards and salamanders have little vestigial elements, and they'll still try to grapple with them and that sort of thing. But I don't think they really had much of a function in a Tyrannosaur. Also, a lot of Tyrannosaur arms are broken. So if they had an important function, they could certainly go several months before they could heal again and still make a living. So I just don't think they're really doing much of anything.
So one of your big claims to fame with the T-Rex was aging Sue. So I would like to hear a little bit about this as somebody who was the right age to be hearing about Sue as she was discovered in all the lawsuits and such.
Yeah, that's, I'll try to give you the short version. I was Jack Horner's graduate student at Montana State University, a very famous paleobiologist, and I did my master's with him. And back then, the thought was that we couldn't age a Tyrannosaur, and there were two problems. When you got a big animal like T-Rex, first of all, the bones are hollowed out, so they're air-filled, and that was common of all the carnivorous dinosaurs. And so as they were growing, their bones became hollower and hollower. It'd be like trying to age a tree, but you cord out the middle, so you're missing a lot of information. The other thing is, with long-lived animals, particularly large animals, they remodel their bones too. So what happens is, and this happens in humans too, by the time we're 25, you completely remodel your bones. So in the case of T-Rex, that ate up a whole bunch of the growth rings. So I remember Jack telling me we'd never know the age of T-Rex. And so traditionally people would look at the thigh bone, the femur, and cut that. And so it just looked like we were never going to get anywhere. And also, all T-Rexes back then were adults. No one, we had juvenile T-Rexes, but everybody just thought they were different species. And so, anyway, what happened is I visited the Field Museum, and I was looking at Sue and some of the other Tyrannosaurs, and I realized when I was looking at the ribs and also the pubis, which is one of the hip bones, I realized I could see all the growth rings, and these are bones that are not hollowed out in these carnivorous dinosaurs. And on day one, I counted it up, and I said, I believe Sue's about 27. And that was just with a hand lens. Ultimately, I found it was 28. But
pretty close.
So I showed that to the curators, and I was really excited. Obviously, no one had ever aged something like that, and I had to work with the Field Museum for about 6 months, trying to convince them to let me cut up some of these pieces of this $8.63 million dinosaur. And eventually they decided it was worth a try. And you got to understand, when you mount a big dinosaur skeleton like that, there's often pieces that don't go into the mount. And those are the ones that I targeted. So basically I figured out it was about 28 years of age. So Sue was known for being really beat up, lots of injuries and that sort of thing. And I was stunned at how young it was. So when I went into that research, people believe that based on scaling it as a cold-blooded reptile, it would have been about 200 years of age. Other people, some of my other colleagues, a little more extreme, were saying, well, dinosaurs are birds are dinosaurs, and therefore maybe it grew up in a year and a half or something like that, which I didn't think was possible. And anyway, And then an elephant, those animals, a full-grown elephant's about, 60, 70 years. I thought that's where it was going to be. I was surprised it was just 28. And so because of its injuries and how young it was, I basically dubbed T-Rex the James Dean of dinosaurs. It lived fast and it died young, and that really resonated with the press. So anyway, it was a really exciting study. So I knew that, and then I took 3 or 4 more years. I decided that wasn't a good enough question. So I teamed up with some of my colleagues from the Field Museum, the American Museum, the Churro Museum, and we cut up subadults of T-Rex and figured out its growth curve. And so T-Rex was growing at about 5.5 pounds per day, which shows the Atkins diet doesn't work, by the way. So again, that wasn't enough for me. So I decided, well, how did T-Rex get so big? And so we went and sampled a whole bunch of close relatives of T-Rex, like Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus, and established their growth curves. And from that, we were able to show that how T-Rex became a giant. It essentially just grew at explosive rates during its teenage years. And it's been pretty much found throughout the Dinosauria as well. So anyway, I think it was like 3 studies wrapped up into one, but it's just it's kind of the way I am. I just take things a little too far, maybe.
Well, or just the curiosity doesn't end when you just have some of the answer. There's always going to be so many more things to know about.
Yeah. What's funny, Nate, is so I worked on aging Sue for about 2 years before I really thought I had it. And so you're the first. The great thing about science is you're the first person in the history of the planet to know that factoid. And you work so hard at it and spend a lot of money, that sort of thing. And what do? You immediately run next door and tell your neighbor, and then you publish a paper, the whole world knows about it. So for a minute there, you're like the only person who knows something that's really cool. But that's the excitement of science, I guess. And I remember doing that, though, running down the hall and telling all my colleagues. There you go.
Like, oh my gosh, check out this thing you didn't know before. Like, it's cool to
everyone knows.
New discoveries, man.
It was a lot of fun.
What brought us to this conversation today was a paper you were involved with Gorgosaurus, and they found an intact stomach. Is that rare to find an intact stomach in general?
Yeah, absolutely. It was. We found the stomach contents of this animal, and so there's only a handful of dinosaurs where the stomach contents are really well preserved. Usually in cases where a small carnivorous dinosaur ate a whole animal, that kind of thing. For Tyrannosaurids, these big Tyrannosaurs, this is a Gorgosaurus, so the adult would have been about 3,000 kilograms. It would have been about 10 meters long. And for those animals, we occasionally find little pieces of bone that are pulverized in their stomach cavities. So this was a really small juvenile Gorgosaur. I aged it at about 6 years of age. And it was maybe 4 meters in length, 300 kilograms. So a Tyrannosaur, a young Tyrannosaur like that is really rare, incredibly rare. And this one's really well preserved. And then to find the stomach contents in there is just, these are the best stomach contents in any Tyrannosaur ever, which is really exciting. I liken it to, I don't know, finding the crown jewels in the bottom of a Cracker Jack box. It's like, wow, it's all there. It's just unbelievable. And so just a remarkable fossil. And it really opened up, or basically answered some questions about what juvenile Tyrannosaurs were doing. So a juvenile Tyrannosaur was a very gracile animal, kind of more like a raptor, I guess, in some sense than a big T-Rex kind of looking animal. And they had very, very slender teeth, blade-like teeth. So it just didn't have very robust skulls or anything like that. So we know the adults pulverized bone. We know that from fecal matter called coprolites, and then a few adult Tyrannosaurs with broken bones that we found around their stomachs. And so it was a huge mystery as to who filled in the kind of middle niches in Cretaceous ecosystems. Basically, up to about 300 kilograms, we have all kinds of raptors and other kind of carnivorous animals, and then nothing, just juvenile Tyrannosaurs going all the way up to the full-size ones. And so the theory was that these animals maybe were filling in this niche and feeding upon different prey than the adults. And so this is the first empirical evidence showing that was truly the case. I think every spring, these little dinosaurs called centipeds, little omnivorous turkey-sized animals were running around. They would have lots of young. These animals had 20 or 30 eggs, so there were lots of young hatching out. Very few of them are going to make it to adult size. And these young Gorgosaurs were more than happy to see that was not the case. And then the other thing that was really stunning about that is I would have thought that the Tyrannosaur would have eaten these animals in their entirety. That's what Komodo dragons do. That's what crocodiles do. But instead, what we found was just the hind legs. So basically, it wasn't just a snapshot of this Gorgosaurus, dying on that one day. From the stomach contents, we had a kind of view as to what it was up to the last couple of weeks. And so there were the hind limbs of two of these small centipedes in its stomach region. One was much more digested than the other, pitted with stomach acid. And very few animals can digest bone, by the way. We knew Tyrannosaurs could do it, and these young ones could do it as well. So it basically told us, and then it was literally focusing on the best parts of these animals. It was probably gutted the animal, tore off its legs, and moved on. And so that was a real shocker to me. And I was really happy that the Royal Tyrrell Museum and the University of Calgary asked me to come in and help out with that project.
Can you tell us where that sample was found? Where did that fossil come from? Like, what part of the world were?
Yeah, this was found in Dinosaur. The specimen was found in Dinosaur Provincial Park, which is in Alberta. It's about maybe 100 miles west of Calgary. It's incredible badlands out there, and it was found in the park by Darren Tankey, who is one of their technicians, and he found the specimen in 2009, and I think in 2010 they actually brought it in the museum. And as he was preparing it, he noticed these bones in the stomach region, and he slowed down. That's why it took so long to get this out. And so he very meticulously worked through it to try to figure out what was going on here. And then about 2012, I saw the specimen, and then I was asked to come help out, try to figure out the ages of the age of the Gorgosaurus, the young Tyrannosaur, which is about 6 years of age, and then also help identify and age these juvenile creatures that are eaten. So it's really exciting, and the plans are that'll probably go on display at some point so the public can enjoy it as well.
It being in Alberta kind of leads us into some other work that you've done in Alaska and looking at the kind of Arctic dinosaurs. And one of the questions that came to my mind is kind of what were those environments like at the time? Like, were they as snowy as we think of them today?
Pat Druckenmiller is the director of the Alaska Museum of the North, and I'm from Alaska, so I've always wanted to work up in Alaska, and so we teamed up to study dinosaurs that were found in the Prince Creek Formation. This is right up on the Beaufort Sea, essentially the Arctic Ocean, along the Colville River. And dinosaurs have been known there since they were found in the late 60s, but they thought they were woolly mammoth bones. And ultimately, about 12 years later, somebody realized they were dinosaurs. And so we've been mounting expeditions that are NSF funded now for about 12 years, and to try to figure out how these animals made a living up in the Arctic. And back then, it wasn't like it is today. It's obviously a very cold environment, but it's not a place you would expect to find dinosaurs. We tend to think of dinosaurs as being from tropical environments or basically desert kind of environments along the equator and these sorts of things. So basically warm environments. It was more, and some of our analyses have shown that it was about, the mean annual temperature was about 54 Fahrenheit, which is equivalent to Juneau, Alaska, which isn't a place you go if you want to go look for turtles and snakes and lizards today. So it was a cold environment. It definitely snowed on these animals. We have evidence for that. And also, they would have experienced about 4 or 5 months of absolute complete polar darkness. So we dove into this project looking at this as a wonderful natural test of dinosaur physiology. So there were theories that the dinosaurs up there were actually from Alberta, the same species from Alberta and Montana, and that they would make 3,000-mile treks back and forth, to escape the cold, but take advantage of the floral, bloom that would occur each spring and summer. So that was, and also, but the alternative to that was that maybe they were up there year round. So this is the coldest environment in the Cretaceous period. These are the most northern dinosaurs known. So 85 degrees north. I mean, they were up there with Santa Claus. So they were basically exposed to an environment you wouldn't expect. And what we found is they were actually nesting up there. And so, in fact, almost every species up there was nesting up there. So they were there year round. Now, how they pulled that off is the next question. And so that'll be the topic of our next grant, honestly. And what's really interesting is what we find up there. We find birds, we find mammals, we find dinosaurs. We know birds and mammals are warm-blooded. So I think it's some of the strongest evidence that the dinosaurs were definitively warm-blooded animals. They definitely weren't migrating, so they're up there year round. What they ate in the winter, I have no idea. Most of the trees were deciduous, and so they would have, all the foliage would have, all their leaves would have been shed. So how they made a living, I have no idea. And so that's what we're trying to figure out. And the other cool thing is, or I think it's interesting at least, is that everything we're finding up there, the mammals and the birds and the dinosaurs are all new species. So we've argued that we've discovered a lost world of dinosaurs. In other words, everyone just thought these were the same dinosaurs from Alberta and Montana. That's not what we're finding. So we feel that these were basically animals that were adapted for the Arctic conditions back then. And so it's really been exciting working up there. So, but there's more to come. So.
Can you tell us a little bit about the specific species, I guess, or the kinds of dinosaurs you're finding there?
The dinosaurs we're finding up in the Cretaceous Arctic of Alaska are really interesting. We have a Tyrannosaur called Nanuqsaurus. We have several duck-billed dinosaurs. One of them we named called Grunelic cookbeckensis. We actually go to the Inupiat elders and ask them what they would call it. So we let them name our dinosaurs. So, and that's a neat name. It means ancient grazer of the Kukpik, which is the Colvin River. So it just means ancient grazer of the Colvin River is what it means. So anyway, we have a giant raptor up there of some sort. We're trying to figure out what that is. We got a bunch of small raptors. We have ostrich dinosaurs, beaked creatures. So, and we discovered a little tiny horned dinosaur called Leptoceratops. That's certainly going to be a new species. We got a bunch of stuff to name here. Then there's at least one horned dinosaur called Pachyrhinosaurus that had a big ugly boss on its nose and that sort of thing. So, we went into this. It really wasn't known what was up there. It was known that there was a pachycephalosaur, a little piece of one of those was found. It was understood there was a duck-billed dinosaur and a horned dinosaur, probably a tyrannosaur and that sort of thing. But our work has revealed just thousands of new materials and that sort of thing, to the point where we can hone in on what these animals really are. Like I said before, people just thought these were just scraps of animals that lived down in Alberta and Montana, and that's not what we're finding. So it was a shockingly much richer environment or community than we ever realized, and that it's not just the dinosaurs. It's so the dinosaur community there matches what we're seeing down in the lower 48 and into Alberta as well. It was a very rich environment, but it extends over to the fish that we're finding up there, the mammals and the birds. There's a whole bunch of new species up there. So it was just like I said, it was a lost world that we just never really realized. So it's I don't know. It's really exciting field work. It's pretty it's expensive and difficult research to do, but I really enjoy getting back to Alaska, because that's where I'm from initially anyway. So.
And having that lifelong connection to biology in Alaska, how does it feel to be discovering unknown creatures? It's incredible.
It's really exciting when you find dinosaur remains. Typically, just find little scraps and that sort of thing. Once in a while, you get lucky, you'll see a bone coming out of the hill, and you'll dig in and realize you have a skeleton. That in and of itself is really exciting. Honestly, when we find things in the field, we're not exactly sure what we're looking at, and if you do it right, you'll jacket up these fossils and bring them back, and you won't realize whether you have a new species or not for a year or two until it gets prepared and that sort of thing. It's very much like we discussed with the Gorgosaur discovery up in Alberta. It took several years for them to realize that they had something really, really special in that case, and that's kind of the case with us too.
Special thanks to Gregory Erickson. For the Discovery Files, I'm Nate Podker. You can watch a video version of this conversation on our YouTube and Roku channels by searching at NSF Science. Discover how the U.S. National Science Foundation is advancing research at nsf.gov.